Unfiltered, the official Sunderland AFC podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of SAFC Unfiltered, sponsored as ever by Alpha Security. Myself and Danny headed back down to the Academy of Light this week, where we recently caught up with Christian Speakman, but this time it's the turn of the gaffer. A first face-to-face as well for ourselves with the gaffer as well, Danny, even though, you know, it feels like we've been 100 yards behind him for the whole season.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we spoke to him earlier in the season, didn't we, over Zoom, with his first interview for the podcast, and then, as you say, throughout the season, we've been just up behind him there on the gantry, so it was good to sit down with him and have a chat and see what his thoughts are from his time so far at the club.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to hear his perspective on things, whereas we spoke to Christian, he kind of laid out what he's done so far and his grand plan, if you like, but of course an important cog in that and a very modern way of managing a football team is Lee Johnson's role, isn't it? And that's going to be, again, it's a thing that takes time. This is not his squad, and the summer's a real opportunity, you think, as well, to really show off this new model with they're trying to do at the football club.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I was speaking to Christian as well, and then obviously with speaking to the gaffer, I think when he took the job, he knew obviously the size of Sunderland and being in League One as well, and what was expected of him this season, whether it's automatic promotion or to get us up into the playoffs. And at this moment in time, we've achieved that. I think, yes, there was disappointment because we didn't quite get over the line in terms of one of the automatic places, but we've got another go at it, haven't we? And I think he's looking forward to it, and I think if we don't go up, as Christian's mentioned there is a plan in place, hopefully at the start of next season, with some of these young lads breaking through and getting a chance, and I think there's a lot of positives looking ahead.
Okay then, with all that in mind, this is the conversation we had with Lee Johnson earlier this week. We're delighted to be joined by head coach Lee Johnson here on SAFC Unfiltered. How are you doing, Lee? It's nice to be in a room with you. It's the first time we've had the chance to do this since you've been here.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, it's good to meet you in person. I've obviously seen a lot and heard a lot about you guys. Obviously, I know Danny from before and playing with him. But at the same time, yeah, it's good to get to know as many people as possible that are involved in the club.
Yeah, and particularly over this period of time as well, since the end of the league table and the league fixtures, you have you had a chance to stop and take stock of your surroundings and have some coaching sessions and stuff like that? 'Cause it's been a relentless season, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been good fun. Obviously, I was well rested in terms of having sort of 5 months out of work, and I was delighted to get the opportunity at a good club, big club. I knew there'd be challenges. You know, you never get a job without those challenges, and I think added in with the COVID challenges and the fact that you've really got to be adaptable, it's been relatively obviously successful. It was a fantastic Papa John's win, and I know it's not the most prestigious trophy in the world, but for us, obviously you want to breed success, and that means win the competition that you're in. So that was a good day for us. Put to bed the Wembley hoodoo as well, as everybody else talks about, even though we didn't feel it in particular here. And we're looking forward to now going into a playoff campaign with full of beans, really.
Yeah, what has this time allowed you to do with the squad then going into these playoffs? Has it given you an opportunity to get some philosophies across a little bit easier?
I think originally I was able to come in with a pretty strong hit of sort of detail and training sessions that are built around the philosophy, and then generally, I think, what do we have, 22 games in about 76 days or something like that. So it becomes about rest, recover, and all your tactical work is done either in preparation for the game or reviewing the performance on video, basically. So that bit can become a little bit relentless sometimes, and sometimes a little bit fatiguing for the players. So you just got to get that balance really.
And
between.
It's frustrating for you as well, though, with probably ideologies in mind, just not having the time to implement them as well.
I think you always, in an ideal world, would go in with a pre-season, because I think pre-season is the real moment that you can bed in those principles. But at the same time, the lads have been excellent and really receptive. I think probably my biggest frustration the tenure so far is just how much we've had to adapt and change and not been able to keep that level of consistency, whether that be in team shape or team selection. And most of that has been through through unforeseen circumstances. And I think just the fact that the COVID scenario that we had, the injuries that we've had, and we've had to be really adaptable. And I think a lot of credit's got to go to the players in that sense, because they have been, and players haven't grumbled at playing out of position, and there's been 2 or 3 that have had to do that pretty regular.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at the season that's just finished now and obviously going into the playoffs, but have you reflected and maybe felt a little bit, or certainly disappointment there in the fact that we were so close? We were churning away, we were getting closer, climbing the table, got to Hull, got to Peterborough, and then all of a sudden it just went away from us. I think it's the reaction we're looking for now coming away from that, isn't it? That run we went on, was it 14 games unbeaten? Then we have that period where we couldn't win for 7 games. That's gone away from us now, and then it's a case of rebuilding, getting reset, I think is the word you used when I heard you last week on one of your interviews, and getting ready to go, getting a 2-game showdown almost, isn't it, at Lincoln?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're sort of reflecting and reviewing a season which is not finished yet, you've always got to, I suppose, be objective as well, and we try and look at the games objectively after, in terms of remove the emotion. Are we performing the actions that we work towards in training? Are individuals at their top form? And there's no doubt we had a bit of a flat line in terms of results. At times in some of those games, I honestly think we was a little bit unlucky. I think if you
would
play
you say
those...
the performances didn't alter too much from my point of view in watching it? I just thought we'd come out the wrong side of a result, whereas before we were coming out shading games and coming out when we were getting the odd goal and winning those games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we maybe, where we were solid at the back, that sort of went away from us. The basics, corners, I think Wigan was the prime example for me. The detail in set plays, and then you conceding goals, and ultimately it's that, not say fragile, but it plays on the lads' minds at the back then maybe a little bit, do you think? Yeah,
there's no doubt our defensive solidarity hasn't been even up to this point as strong as it was sort of 10-15 games ago. There's no doubt in that. I think that individuals, we have this spell now to really get everybody going, and that varies across the group really. Sometimes that's that bit of fatigue that's set in. Somebody like Max Power, for example, that's nigh on played every minute of every game, and as obviously as an ex-player how hard that is. You're basically running a half marathon every 3 days, at high intensity, and I think that there's a psychological piece that goes with that as well. So I think that we haven't been able to rest and maybe rotate as much as we would have liked certain players, and particularly along that back line where we felt going into the season, and certainly when I came in, we had very strong options and a number of them. So I think we've done as best as we could with what we've had, apart from probably the Wigan game where I thought in my feeling was it was a poor performance, and we didn't go out there. And I think Sunday was a little bit flat, a little bit of a dead rubber. But I think really now the challenge is to draw a line in the sand effectively, like you said, on the season. Okay, we've finished 4th. There's been a lot of progression and succession in that, and there's continuous succession planning in terms of young players coming through.
So it's a good thing, you think, with having this break in almost 9-10 days between, rather than going straight into the playoffs 3 or 4 days later, get bodies back in. Tom Flanagan's got some minutes under his belt. Maybe it gives you a chance to adjust things at the back as well.
I think for us it's massive. I think this spell is it gives us that ability to regroup, like you say, get some minutes in the legs, be able to push players that we feel need pushing, rest players that need resting, sharpen the feet of 2 or 3, and sharpen the minds of 3 or 4 more. And I think there's a natural excitement that will come with this. First and foremost, the fans being back in the stadium.
How excited are you about that?
Yeah, unbelievably. I mean, the player, interestingly today in training, the players talking about it a lot, and just even the away game, having that feeling of sort of a cause, creating a cause, going into an away game where there's no fans that are supporting Sunderland. It becomes that siege mentality. And then to come back, which is why I think getting the second leg at home was important, to our fans that haven't seen us for a while and should be buoyed hopefully by a good performance, and therefore can try and get us over the line with that passion that I've heard so much about Sunderland fans and seen it actually, but not experienced it as a Sunderland employee.
Looking at the playoffs as well, did you have a preference of who you got in terms of whether it be Lincoln, Oxford or Blackpool, or not really? Do you look at the past results during the season? I know a lot of the fans do, and they say what points we've taken: 6 points off Oxford, 4 off Lincoln. Blackpool took 6 off us. Do you look at it like that, or not really?
To be honest, for me, it was more about getting us right.
Yes.
I think that's I always fancy us if we're at our best, mentally, physically, technically, tactically. If we're at it, if we've had a good week's training, if the boys are well rested, well focused, I believe we can beat anybody, particularly over 2 legs. That's no disrespect to the other teams, but that's obviously me as Sunderland head coach that believes in my team, and I do believe that we will turn up, and everything that we're doing from now until then, of course, is to get us in that frame of mind.
I think so, and I think, looking for me, the best performances throughout the season, I think, was Portsmouth away over the course of the 90 minutes, the way we controlled the game, and obviously Lincoln away on the counter-attack where we put 4 past them, and I think they were top or second at the time as well, weren't they? So maybe that little psychological barrier for them comes into play, being at home in the first leg as well, possibly.
Well, I think whenever a team plays Sunderland, we see a rise in tempo. We do. You know, I watch all the games and 3 or 4 games of the opposition before they play Sunderland, and every time there's more energy that comes out of the performance. So I think naturally for any team playing us, and for us, it becomes a high-tempo game. You've got the added dynamic of the fans, you've got the added dynamic of Sky TV, plus the fact it's a cup competition, and it means everything, if you like, to everyone. So I've been in teams that have froze in that time situation, and I've been in teams that have absolutely excelled in that type situation. So obviously we want the latter, and all of our experiences and the players that have been in the playoffs before, players that have won the playoffs, players that have lost in the playoffs, we need to bring all those together to give us the best possible chance in the detail to make sure we're at the best we can be when it matters most.
So have you got a squad in mind who you'd ideally like to put down on paper today to take on Lincoln in the first leg?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear to me sort of what my best team is, if you like, but you can't always get to that for a number of reasons. So that's the importance of a squad, and then from that position you hope that players obviously make a case to hold the shirt and to retain the shirt, and that will happen, I'm sure, in this playoff spell. You put in a good performance in the first leg, you're guaranteed your place for the second leg, which if you win then guarantees your place for the final. So I think that motivation enough for their own benefit, you know, I suppose from a selfish point of view, which players have to be because that's why they've got to this point, but also for the greater good of the club and the fan base around that as well. So yeah, I honestly, genuinely feel like we should go into this with excitement. You know, it is an achievement from where we were. Yes, we were disappointed in the end not to get in the top 2, but now we're here, we've got to enjoy it. You know, and sometimes that's the hardest thing to do when there's expectation there, and I suppose that just the sheer velocity and the size of the club at Sunderland means that that pressure really is a privilege in terms of the expectation that comes with playing for Sunderland.
And the squad have been down to Wembley, as you've already touched upon, and won silverware this season so far, with the likes of Grant Ledbetter. Almost, you know, you could feel it just watching it, couldn't you? He was like trying to get the city through it almost. You know, you can really feel the civic pride on his shoulders as the game progressed as well, and obviously Linden scoring the goal in that final as well. That's got to help the lads in the dressing room. The fact that, you know, if we were to get to Wembley, they've already done it, and like you say, you know, possibility of fans there as well. And no matter what happens in the summer, there's going to be lots of ins and outs, isn't there? But it's in everyone's interest to have a good 3 games coming up, isn't it?
Absolutely. These players can be legends. You know, they can dine off this for years and years. You know, a double, if you like, a promotion and a Papa John's. is really important, and you don't get many chances as a player. You know, you think that it might come again or it will happen next year. Sometimes, like, there's players that have never been to Wembley and players that have never got silverware, and you know what I mean. So individually, it's a massive achievement and an achievement for their families as well. And it is a big club, and that does come with a lot of scrutiny. And effectively, we're all in League One. So we're here for a reason, and we're fighting very, very hard, obviously, to get out of League One. But at the same time, like I've said before, we have to enjoy the moment. You know, we have to have that mindfulness, if you like. Otherwise, you'll play the result and not the moment, and that can happen as well. So for the players to stay in the moment, to make good decisions in games, and if we make enough good decisions in the game, I guarantee you we'll score, because we've got quality, and therefore the concentration at the back is required to then go and get a result which gets us where we want to be.
I think moving on to contracts as well, and I've heard some fans, which I don't get personally, saying that some of the lads are in a comfort zone playing in League One. They're not fussed if we don't get promoted, which I don't understand, because I think, as you mentioned there, if they are part of a team that's got Sunderland promoted out of this league, on their CV, it gives their agents, if they don't get a contract offered here, then moving on, it gives their agent something to work with, doesn't it? And as you mentioned, they've been part of getting this club at the third time of asking out of this league.
Yeah, I think you've got to be respectful of human nature in these moments. You know, like, again, we've both been players that are coming to the end of our contract. There's a lot of external influences. You'll have the fans and their opinion, which sometimes can create an emotional instability with the player. You'll have the manager's communication and opinion. You'll have the agents that are obviously trying to feed their kids and their agenda to maximise financially for the player, but also for their own benefit and their company. And then you've also got a potential negotiating club, whether that be Sunderland or anyone else, trying to get the best deal for that player. So it is a time in the season where each player will have their own various moments of emotional instability, unless they've got 4 or 5 years, if you like, left on their contract. So I think from a holistic point of view, it's my job and my staff's job to just recognise that, you know. And I've had a lot of individual chats leading up to this week, based on all those things, you know, based on just really being human and being showing empathy, I think, to the situation. And anybody in any walk of life, if there was uncertainty over their employment moving forward, you know what I mean, it wouldn't be an easy time for the family. And people want to be here. The players want to be here. I can guarantee you that. There's no player that's come into my office and said, look, do us a favour, don't offer me a contract because I've got somewhere else, or I want to go somewhere else. I think players want to be here in the Championship. And we want to build. We want to build both in terms of our youth, and want to build on what we've got. Naturally, if you move up a level or if you stay at the same level, there'll be a change in certain areas, in certain positions. But that's just evolution of any football club in any division. So I think that from a player's point of view, you've got an unbelievable vehicle to go and showcase both for the club you're at, but anybody else or potential suitors, that you can be a fantastic player, fantastic teammate, and obviously a successful one at that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned there about some of the youth lads coming through, and Jack's obviously got his new deal, 3-year deal. Where are we at in terms of some of the other lads looking at pushing through, the likes of Ollie Younger? You know, Josh Hawkes is doing well, isn't he, in the 23s? Scored again yesterday, I think. And these lads coming through now, would you say it's a big summer for them? At their age they're at now, got to be looking to push on, and Dan Neil as well is another one who's had a taste of it this season in the Papa Johns, and these lads coming back after the close season and really having a go at it and trying to force your hand into getting them right involved next season into the first team setup.
Absolutely, and that's what we want. You know, that's the starting point. Like, we're desperate for our young players to do well. I think just to give Josh Hawkes and Dan Neil as an example, one of the big focuses now is their summer. Do you know what I mean? How can we sort of bridge the gap, if you like, physicality-wise, from under-23s football to first-team football? So part of that journey will be that they will sit down with myself on a football front, then they will sit down with the sports science team, and we'll actually build them a really itemised plan, if you like. And I'll just give you an example. So Dan Neil, we feel lungs-wise is good. You know, we haven't got to worry about him in that sense. But the plyometric power, if you like, required to play the position, we think he's got some gains. Now, maturation-wise, it's great because he's got those gains in him and he's a fantastic professional. So we expect him to be able to load up effectively over the summer. If he comes back and is last in a 12-minute run or a cross-country run, that's not a problem to me, as long as we're seeing that burst and that dynamic. So you've got to build their strength, you've got to build their plyometric power, and what happens then is in pre-season, I make really sure that in my mind everybody's got a clean slate, because you want to be receptive to that young player making a breakthrough. Sometimes, as you'll know as well, when you're a young player coming through, you're always seen as a young player, even when you're 24, 25, like Lyndon Gooch, for example.
Yeah, and when you've come through at that club as well, isn't it, rather than coming in as
So sometimes you move at 20 to a club, you're seen as a senior player, and actually you're probably not. So I think the perception in football is often a player's reality, and that's something that's got to be really mitigated against, to make sure that we're really assessing our young players before we recruit anyone else.
Yeah, and is that where the acquisitions of people like James Young comes in handy, because you've got him looking at data and analysis of these players at the club already?
Yeah, it's very important for me, that as well. Like, from a football point of view, you can have potential and you can have great attributes, but it doesn't mean you're performing. So by the same token, I want to know that every action in the under-23 game has a value for our first team philosophy, because then what should happen is when Josh Hawkes, for example, is performing to first team standards in the under-23s, we know, okay, he's got the potential, he's definitely got the attributes, and now he's actually proving it with his data in his performance. So we should be able to then evaluate that data versus Joe Bloggs that we're potentially looking to sign in that position, and say, no, actually, it's Josh Hawkes that's going to step up, and we're going to leave the one that we're going to sign for X amount of money. And that's really the check and balance, I think. But unless there's a data set built around the philosophy, then it's just subjective. And at that point, I think that's where the club potentially in the past have made quite a few bad decisions. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen that historically, haven't we? When the Premier League, big money signings, multi-million pound signings, which have been complete flops. And I think the people in the city and the followers of the football club are sick of that model. So this new way of thinking, we spoke to Christian Speakman on the last podcast as well. He's very much all about this, isn't he? Given evidence for reasons of purchase and value as well, because I'm sure the owner, is not going to hand over money quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the way it should be. You don't want to be frivolous and waste money. You want to know that every pound you're spending is effectively investing. So when we talk about data, it's not necessarily that the data is going to pick a player and then we're going to sign on the back of that. The data will flag, hopefully, players that suit our playing style earlier than maybe anyone else can spot them. And then it comes down to the eye, because I'll look at a player and I'll say, I'll give you an example, Denver Hume. I think what he hasn't got, I can coach and my staff can coach. I think what he has got is difficult to coach. So Denver Hume, for me, is quite an exciting project, if you like. As long as his attitude's good, he stays fit, we work with him on the training ground. So there's various parts to his game that when I was assessing the Sunderland squad and looking at areas, I felt, okay, well, he's one that we can definitely raise the value of. And that doesn't necessarily mean in a monetary sense. That could mean raise the value of better actions and therefore more input into the game and therefore more output in terms of results. So that's what we're aiming to do with as many of these individuals. You've seen it with Charlie, and obviously his output goals-wise has been fantastic. But for me, the process that's gone into it and the work that he's put in to getting into dangerous zones, to understanding the science behind it, to understanding when the deliveries are coming in, to actually watching his performance and breaking it down and almost seeing his career as a business rather than just be emotional about, okay, I've missed a chance and I've got battered on Twitter. Do you know what I mean? And there's a difference to that. And in this modern day and age, there's so many external influences that can affect the mood both ways. And sometimes it can overinflate a heroic status, and other times it can demonise somebody that doesn't really deserve it.
Do you try and advise the players not to look at social media and fan media, if you like, at all costs, or do you not get involved with them?
I think there's got to be an awareness of it. I think that some people will get affected by it and some people's water off a duck's back. I think it depends on what emotional state you're in as an individual at that moment in time. I mean, listen, you see how much money's involved in this stuff now. So, like, building a brand isn't, you know, like you can see Luke O'Nien, for example, like almost building a brand. He's doing his podcasts and stuff like that, and he seems quite comfortable in that area of social media. Me personally, I am on it because I think it's a great tool for coaching and stuff like that, but I haven't refreshed my Twitter feed in 5 years, so that'll be interesting.
A lot of messages waiting there.
I know, there'll be all sorts in there, trust me.
I think during our playing days it wasn't really around since 2009 Twitter came about, so well, late in my days, but I think at the end of the day, you know if you've had a good game, you know if you've had a bad game, don't you? So you don't need to go on social media to read up on what fans' views are on you, I suppose.
I see, like, sometimes maybe 6-7 minutes after my post-match debrief, players checking it.
Really?
So there you go. So the emotional state of that, and I think it actually changes your management. I get flagged now from the media department, like red, amber, green, to what that feeling is between that particular player. I don't look at it myself, and that's not being disrespectful. That's because I have to keep like as straight a focus as I can possible to not be influenced, if you like, by opinion.
So is that more what you've got to say to the lads, really? You keep it in-house, in the changing rooms as much as you can, and then when you come out to do the post-match press conferences, perhaps, I was going to say, you don't want to come out and volley the lads anyway on the camera, do you? You keep everything inside what you want to say to them and come out and tell it almost in a little bit of a different way, would you say, really, to the press?
I think you're always talking. I think the post-match is really difficult, particularly after a loss, because you're talking to your players, because you know, first and foremost, they're studying, is he looking after me in public? You've got, obviously, you have to be honest, because the minute you're not honest in front of the fans, they sniff that out as quick as anything. You're also talking to your board, because they're looking, you know, I always say the health of the team is in the face of the coach. You know, like, people are looking at you. Are you tired? Are you upset? Are you aggressive? Are you happy? What are your lines on your face? Have you slept? Do you know what I mean? You need a full-on facial before you go out for a post-match. So I think all those things, if you look at the top Premier League managers, they can get beat 4-0. And it's hard to actually work out, like, you know, if you didn't know the result, you just watch the interview. And I think that's the real art to it, is keeping that consistency. But yeah, I will always generally touch on what we've discussed in the post-match sort of debrief, and I'll try and keep that level of honesty so that the players obviously see it, but the fans get a little bit of a feeling for what the mood is.
For instance, prime example is obviously Wigan away. You've been beat, you know you're going to come out, and you can't come out bouncing with a smile on your face, and you know almost what questions are going to come from the press. Say Groundhog Day in a way, but was the team selection right? Was the formation right? Does that grind you down a little bit and annoy you in any way, would you say, or not really? Or are you happy that fans and people question your team and the formations in a way?
I think it's par for the course in terms of, you got to expect that. You know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You make bold changes, you make bold decisions, you play players in different positions. It works, you're a genius. It doesn't, you're a villain. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that you've got to be bold. Like I always, what enables me to be bold is I always start from the point as I make peace with the worst case scenario. And I think whether that be the playoffs and getting knocked out in the playoffs, or picking a team selection, you know, or my communication, I think that, like I say, if you make peace with the worst case scenario, it allows you to have broken through that barrier almost from the start, and therefore you can act and behave a little bit more bold maybe than you could if you had that element of fear, or what are people are thinking about me. You know, it's like they'll pick on anything, mate. Any flaw you've got, like what you look like, what you say, your tonality, squeaky voice, whatever that is, they're coming for you. So I think you just got to accept that and understand, like, it's part of the job. Exactly.
You know, as you know, there'll be people listening to this, fans listening around the world, and 6-7-year-old kids in the playground look up to players and try the skills that they've seen on Match of the Day over the weekend. As a coach, who inspires you, and who do you look at within world football when you think, you know, that I'd love to try some tactics like that one time, or even the manner like you've just been touching upon post and pre-game as well?
I think I'm always learning. I think I've got that sort of thirst for knowledge. You know, I like to study people. I like to study teams. I see it as like almost like a big bubble of like philosophy, and you know, it's like you take things off certain people and you'll say, I like that. I could be listening to anybody. It could be not just football. It could be a business leader. You know, it could be a fan that owns a company, and we're talking about how they deal with their clients, or how their sales pitch, because everything's a sales pitch really. If I'm talking to a player about something I want, it's a sales pitch. If I want to bring a player in, it's a sales pitch. If I'm talking to the fans, I'm selling the dream. Do you know what I mean? So the communication piece is unbelievable. If you're a world-class communicator, and obviously you can do everything else pretty well, you'll be all right, I think, in football management. So certainly teams-wise, CPD that I've done, called CPD, it's continuous personal development. I went out to Leipzig, was a good example, and that was brilliant. I went out there and I went out for 4 days with Paul Mitchell, invited me out, and I watched them, and I thought I'd pull back 2 or 3 things, and I think I wrote down like 47, 48 things that I could implement. That was at my previous club. But then it gives you that opportunity to learn, if you like, and draw from it. Man City have been excellent with me ever since I was at Oldham. So I've always been sort of close to the City group, if you like. I went out to New York City, been offered a couple of roles in the past there, like allowed shared partnerships with coaches that have come in to watch me work, go in to watch them work. Work with psychologists, work with personality profiling in the City group. So, like, for me, those type things have been fantastic and really valuable, I think, for the club that I've been at the time.
Yeah, and you are at Sunderland right now. How are you enjoying the role, 6 months in?
I'm really enjoying it, yeah. I really enjoy the people, I think, first and foremost. You know, you want to get on, you want to make sure that the players are receptive. You know, there's a lot of people that have worked hard for a lot of years here and have almost been in the doldrums, if you like, for too long. So to be able to lift that, or be a small part of the collective work, if you like, that lifts that. And I feel that there's a lot of people at the club that deserve success. Of course, then we move on to the fans, of which it's been quite surreal because I haven't really had that much interaction.
Have you bumped into any in the supermarket or anything?
A few, yeah, but not many. Yeah. Probably less than a dozen, I'd say. And I always obviously stand and have a good chat, and they've been very supportive and very positive, and you can really feel in every conversation that passion and that feeling. And it's almost a bit different to the other clubs I've been at. You know, it's almost verging on like religion, somewhere in between passion and religion, if you like.
But there's this strange synergy that's always happened between the club and the city. If the club's doing well, the city seems to be doing well. And right now there's a lot of rebuilding happening in the city centre. Yeah. I don't think there's any coincidence that the fact that the club has been pretty much rebuilt from its core right now as well at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a lot of work to be done. Honestly, there's mega bucks of work to be done. I look at it, and the football piece at the moment, in terms of the top of the pyramid or top of the iceberg, is probably the best bit. There's loads to be done, and that's not the people, by the way. That's like the infrastructure, that's the investment, that's like tidying up.
Well, you're completely changing the landscape within the club, aren't you?
Exactly, and that has to be done, and even like people have got to be passionate about working for Sunderland, whether you're the highest paid player on the pitch, or whether you're, you know, I don't know, cleaning the toilets. You know what I mean? That's got to be a consistency of, I will go the extra mile to make this club better than when I walked in this morning. And that's the attitude we've got to take. And I think it sticks out a mile when you see somebody that hasn't got that attitude. But the majority of people at the club just need that clarity, need that guidance and that investment to be able to go, all right, this is how we're going to do it properly. And it has to be a long-term view.
Yeah.
And that's the bit, I suppose, is most tricky at a club like this, because I'll look at it as a manager wanting to be here forever and make every decision like that, but knowing you could be gone tomorrow. And I think that bit's really important as well. If there's any form of legacy, it's that you've played a small part in moving the club forward in all aspects, not just those results at the tip of the iceberg.
I think one thing you'll see immediately, though, from when we were allowed to play in front of fans, is that the fans, if they can see effort, you know, they'll get behind you so much. You know, I remember a couple of times in the bad Premier League seasons, you know, the crowd would go crazy. We got a corner or someone did a crunching challenge, and you know, it was just because we fell through the leagues. It is like Groundhog Day to a certain extent in recent seasons, and you'll see so much back from just displaying some effort, you know.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I've asked for since I came in is to bring out your USP, your unique selling point, as much as possible. I really want to encourage the personalities, and that includes janitors, like I say, chefs, do you know what I mean, kit men. If you're brilliant at having little one-on-one chats and you can put your arm around someone's shoulder and make them feel $1 million, do lots of it. You know, if your charisma is Aidan McGeady, can handle whatever 45,000, 2-0 down, and can still produce a bit of magic and stick it in the top corner, bring a lot of it. If your game is winning first and second balls and punching the ball, bring a lot of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think like we don't want to drown people in their weaknesses. We want to make their strengths super strengths, if you like, and then piece together and build a team and build a culture that allows us to bring that, because everybody has a different form of bravery. Like myself as a player, I wasn't the biggest tackler. I could tackle, but I wasn't the biggest tackler. But I'd take the ball 4-0 down in front of 50,000. Do you know what I mean? Everybody will have their own version of that. And that's where I think a fan base can then start to recognise a culture. They can recognise, okay, well, we've got beat, but we've got beat playing our way, and we was unlucky today. We ran out of time. And I know we've cracked it when we could effectively watch an under-23 games in a blank kit and know that that's a Sunderland team, or an under-18 game, or an under-16 game, because that terminology, philosophy, and the method in which we coach it is running like clean all the way through the club. And it's not impossible to get there, but it's not easy. But I think if we can get that, particularly the terminology, with the young players as quickly as possible, understand it means that they can step up and not feel out of sorts when there's all these crazy words being flown about in the first team.
Yeah, and I guess to get to that recognisable DNA, if you like, of the football club, it'll take a little bit of time, won't it?
It will, but we've obviously got to find ways to innovate and integrate that a lot as early as possible. You know, I've taken the under-23s for tactical sessions just so that they understand that. Obviously, you've got video. We're currently building an app, all right, so that app will spread out through the group, and it's not taking artistic license away from the coaches, because that's important as well. I'm not coming in saying I'm the guru of all football, but there's no universal terminology for actions on the pitch, which we need to create, because we need to value, going back to the point where then we need to assess about the attributes, performance, and obviously potential. So we've actually got all this to say, actually, when this player gets pushed up, whether he be 16 years old, you see like Jude Bellingham at Birmingham, we brought a lot of young players through at Bristol as well. It's really important because they're moving in very, very comfortable that they can actually perform at first team level.
So, you know, with the under-23s, for instance, and then, yes, the game they had recently there, would you speak to Elliot Dickman or the other coaches and suggest the formation you'd like them to play if you've got the likes of Dan Neil, if you're looking at him playing an 8, you were on about before, that energy he's got, but looking at them box-to-box runs almost, would you suggest to him, I'd like you to play him there today, or do you let him get on with it and just assess and then discuss it later on after the game?
Well, I don't think you can over-communicate. I think at a football club, particularly in between the top end of the academy and the first team. So I think there's definitely, like you see Jake Vokins plays the other day, Flanagan play. So there's definitely those conversations, but you're also conscious to allow the coach, if you like, to do his thing. He would have themed a week building up to that. I think that review and reflection of the performance is always important. Like, one of the big things when I walked in with those under-23s, I thought the distances from top to bottom were huge and too big, and there was too many attitude errors on the pitch. And I saw a performance, for example, yesterday, on Monday, raised eyebrows, wide eyes, that was very compact, better in our pressing. All right, we're not the most silky side on the ball, but we're certainly showing that desire to win the ball back, and exactly what you talked about in terms of that effort was A grade, and that's what we need, minimum.
Whatever happens in this summer, how important is it that avenues like this between the club and the fans are open to know where you are at that moment in time at the club in your tenure as manager?
Yeah, I think the communication's really important. You can't please everybody as a club and as a manager, but I think that if fans understand that they're going to get honesty, they're going to get openness to a point. You can't sometimes reveal inner details about
name the team on a Tuesday.
Yeah, but it's funny you should say that, because that comes into it. Sometimes the name on a team sheet or the name on a starting 11 is very different.
There's lots of reasoning for
during the week.
Yeah,
there's probably 1,000 little micro management moments throughout that week. I don't know, baby, someone's not slept.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? These are human beings. Someone's got a niggle and you can't really come out and say. It could be contract dispute, whatever that is. Sometimes you've got to take a punch on the nose for the greater good as the manager, but hopefully over a period of time, the fan base learn to trust you as an individual, and like I say, that honesty becomes imperative.
And of course, we are going into these playoffs no matter what happens. Are you looking forward to a summer with the likes of Christian and the team you're building around the club to really get your teeth into a pre-season, which you touched on at the beginning of the podcast, something you really relish?
Yeah, definitely pre-season. I always look forward to pre-season because I do feel like I'm a coach. That's my starting point. I'm a coach. So I think when you can design a pre-season, build around it, push the boys to their limits, get them to know where their 100% is, which probably is something I would question a little bit at the moment as well. To be that sort of super fit, elite, really pressing machine that we want to build. Yes, you've got the recruitment in that and the retention of players and renegotiating that, which is great here because effectively, I can be involved, but it's not the main piece of my work. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to a summer. I want it to be a successful lead into the summer because I want to continue this momentum we've got. And obviously, it can become a bit of a lottery, the playoffs, but we want to swing every moment into our favour as much as possible, and then believe we've got the quality to do it. So, yeah, for me, it's just a part of the evolution of the club, and to try and drive the club forward as best we can. And it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy. You think as a summer, touchwood, let's say we did get into the playoff final, and the dream was realised where we end up in the championship. You probably got 5-6 weeks to recruit. It's not a lot, let me tell you. It's a lot. You're probably talking 10-12 fall down for every player that you bring through.
And do you lose a couple of weeks because all the other clubs have already started their trading?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, clubs will be tapping up our players now. There's no doubt in that. Some players might have even had meetings with managers. So all these considerations at the moment have to come into it, but we just got to control what we can, and that is keep the focus and play the motivated players. And they're all motivated, but varied levels of it based on agenda and based on just feeling at the time.
Yeah, and I know you're a family man as well, Lee. Does that mean you'll be getting asked to go off to a green list country if you can as well, but take the phone and the laptop with you?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one this year. My daughter's 13 in June, and I'm 2 days later I'm 40. So there's a
big family barbecue at least.
Parties to be had, but we've got to wait till the 26th before it all opens up. So to be honest, I'm not even sure. We haven't booked anything, so I'm not sure we'll be able to get away this year. But I'll probably, with a bit of luck, we'll have international breaks, and therefore we can get 4 or 5 days in the first international break.
Okay, but just before you go though, Lee, I just want to, if you could send a message to the fans as we approach these 2 legs against Lincoln City, what's the message to them?
I think my message first of all is just to thank them. Thank them for their support in difficult times. We have felt that, even though I said I haven't bumped into too many, it's because I've been working all hours of every day and I'm nowhere but training ground or home or stadium. So certainly that gratitude, if you like, to the support they've given us, and also just to just draw that belief, and positivity as much as possible, because the players will feed off it. There's no doubt in that, and whether that be your social media or your interactions with everybody, like, success can come through positivity, and we believe that if we're all aligned, it can be really, really powerful going into these playoffs.
A very interesting conversation there with first team coach Lee Johnson. He's definitely got his feet under the table now, and of course that extra time he's had in the run-up of these playoff games will have done him good, and the players good, I think, as well. Yeah, and he said that there, didn't he? He was delighted that he had that 10 days really to work with the lads, see if he can get 1 or 2 back fully fit and see who's available really going into the games, almost a reset, as he said. And I think he's looking forward to it. It's been difficult since he's come in. He's never really been able to have a settled back line. He said there, didn't he, that the amount of defenders we've had, but injury after injury, we've had centre midfielders having to play at the back. But I think from my point of view, looking at it, he took over when we were in 7th place in the league, and he's got us up into the playoffs, but the job's not done, is it? So, no, he's looking forward to it, and hopefully he gets us over the line. Yes, the job is far from done, and I'm sure all Sunderland supporters listening to this around the world are very excited about those playoff games coming up for Sunderland. I'm sure we'll have another podcast of sorts coming up real soon, and I think there's even been a mention of trying to get the top guy, KLD, on a podcast in the summer as well. So hopefully we can make that happen here on SAFC Unfiltered. But that's it for this edition. Thanks as ever from myself and, of course, from Danny as well.